Licensed only for non-commercial private exhibition in homes. Any public performance, other use, or copying is strictly prohibited.
Hi, I'm Gary Striegler, second generation custom home builder. I'm an author for Fine Home Building Magazine, the Journal of Light Construction, and I'm on the faculty at the Mark Adams School of Woodworking. I've given presentations at the Woodworking Show and Builders Shows all across the United States. But one of the things I'm most proud of is when I'm doing trim carpentry for the houses that I build. Really, that's the thing that makes me most excited, is just getting my hands dirty making sawdust. I just have a passion for woodworking.
When you're doing trim carpentry, knowing how to do it safely is just as important as knowing what steps to take. Trim carpentry is really just woodworking, so you want to use the same safety rules that you would when you're doing other woodworking. Always wear safety glasses, always know your tools, pay attention to the caution signs on those tools, read the instructions before you start, don't work when you're tired, and just be careful. You know, if you feel uncomfortable about something you're getting ready to do, it's probably a good idea not to do it. Leave the guards in place, use appropriate push sticks and hold downs, and then you can comfortably work and you'll have great results. One of the secrets of getting really good results for trim carpentry is using a good blade on your miter saw. Even if you've got a great miter saw, but you're using a cheap blade, you're not going to get the best results. This is an example of the type of blade I like to use. It's got 96 teeth, and it's not a thin curved blade. I tend to think that the thin curved blades may deflect a little bit during the cut, and if your blade deflects and moves, you're going to end up with a joint that will never come together. So I really recommend using a good blade with at least 80 teeth on a 12-inch saw. As a good general rule, if you want to know what type of blade you could use, certainly there's a lot of good brands out there, but I'd expect to pay at least $80, maybe as much as $120 for a really good miter saw blade. If you want to get good results, though, you need to have a blade that's going to give you a really good, accurate cut, not wander. Probably the most difficult molding to install is crown molding. And the reason for that is because it leans out. It's almost installing in two different planes, and it's a much longer joint to fit. You also kind of have to think a little bit differently when you're looking at installing the piece of trim. The old joke is you think upside down and backwards. There's two different ways that you can cut crown. The traditional way is called cutting it nested. And what that means is I'm going to cut this piece of molding standing up like this, but the trick is the part of the molding that's against the fence is actually the part that's going to be against the wall when it's installed, and the part of the molding that's down the bed of the saw is part that goes against the ceiling. The piece of molding that goes into this corner, I'm going to cut it on the saw upside down and backwards. Now sometimes what I'll do, just to keep my mind a little bit straighter, is I'll say, oh, that joint's got to go back something like this. Just any kind of a rough mark there helps me so that when I get over to the saw, I know that I need to make a cut that goes somewhat like that. Now, the thing, if you're going to cut your trim nested like this, it's really important to know exactly where you want to sit it. Just the slightest bit of an adjustment up and down will change the cut. So what I'm going to do is look at when this molding fits flat against the wall there, that's my amount of drop. And what I'll do then is I'm going to come in and put a pencil mark on top of this masking tape. At that point, from now on, anytime I'm cutting this crown mold, I'm going to push it right up to underneath that pencil line. Now, you can also put masking tape down here on the bottom, and saw companies also sell accessories that are called crown stops. And what a crown stop does, it attaches to the saw and it holds right here, so you automatically just put the trim to this point and it'll line it up for you automatically. But we can pretty easily do it just by putting masking tape on there. If you're going to run a whole lot of crown molds, you might want to try a set of crown stops and see if they work for you. Okay, so to cut a joint that goes into that corner, I'm going to pivot the saw like so. Now, I'm going to put it right up underneath that line. Now that would be the piece of molding that goes up in that corner. Now, in a little bit we're going to talk about whether we want to cope that joint or whether we want to miter that joint. And we're actually going to show you how to do both techniques. The other way to cut crown molding is cutting it laying flat. And what you have to do is cut on a compound angle. You start out by moving your fence back so that you don't hit it with the saw blade or bump into it with the housing of the saw. Now, almost all miter saws today have got preset stops which make it easy to cut crown laying flat. Most crown moldings are going to be cut on a 38 degree. In other words, when they're installed, they're at a 38 degree angle. A few of them are on 45. That tells us a couple things. If I wanted to know what's the top and bottom of this piece of crown mold, generally speaking, the crown's always going to drop down the wall further than it projects out into the ceiling. So that's a good way of knowing what the top and bottom is. And the reason it drops down the wall more than it projects down the ceiling is because it's on a 38 degree angle. Okay, so if this runs on a 38 degree angle, there's a preset stop for the miter angle at 31.62, and the saw is automatically going to stop there. This saw has preset stops that I can pivot over and hit it, and basically it's about 34 degrees, I believe, 34 point something. But at any rate, there's a little stop which automatically allows me to hit over to it. Now, if I didn't want to go to a 45, I just have to flip that stop out of the way and I go on to a 45. Now, a little hint is you got to make sure that you remember, if you're using that stop, to push it back in, because a couple times I've had some really messed up joints when I thought I was cutting on a 45 and I was really cutting on 34, and that makes a lot of difference. That's the cut that would go in that corner. That's the cut we'd make if we're going into an inside corner. Now, for an outside corner, we just slide the piece of wood this way, and we're going to make a cut that's just the opposite. That's how we would turn and go around the outside corner. Now, some things that are really important about cutting, if you're going to cut your molding laying flat, of course, you've got to really keep it pressed down flat to the table. And you also need to have a piece of crown mold that's flat on the back. Sometimes as you get into bigger and bigger pieces of molding, they'll tend to be cupped on the back. The wider a board is, the more likely it's going to cup. So you can end up in a situation where the piece has got a little bit of a rock to it like that. That can be difficult to get an accurate cut. This piece is really good and flat, so it's going to cut very well. If I was cutting this piece nested, like so, it wouldn't matter quite so much if it was cupped, because I'm just hitting here and there. I think it's a little bit easier for a long piece of molding to cut it laying flat. because when you get a really long piece like this, it can tend to, want to bow a little bit or something. Of course, you can get all kinds of work support stands, and that's another important thing when you're working with molding. I've seen sometimes guys trying to cut molding, maybe they're down on their hands and knees on the floor. Get some kind of a good saw stand that's going to get you to comfortable working height, and then get something that will support the board also. I mean, it's hard enough to get good joints without being down your hands and knees trying to cut. Plus, it's not really safe being down there either. A lot of houses today have corners that aren't 90 degrees though. For instance, over here, we've got a wall that's running at a 45-degree angle, so we've got to make a different cut. All I've got to do to make that cut is pivot my saw to 22.5 degrees instead of the 45, and I'm still going to hold the piece right up underneath my pencil mark, like so. That would be the cut to go around that 45-degree wall, which is on a 22.5-degree angle both ways. Now, I can make that same cut laying flat. To be honest, I normally cut my crown standing up, and that's because, or nested, because that's the way I learned to when I was young. But to lay it down flat, you'd be on about an 18-degree on the miter and about a 22-degree on the bevel.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this material, don't forget to like and subscribe.